Hey there, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here because, wow, we are going to unpack a truly fascinating systemic shift that's happening right now. We're looking closely at Montana's completely new approach to handling substance use within its correctional facilities. This isn't just another story about prisons. It's a deep dive into how a state is actively working to transform its entire infrastructure to tackle one of the most common and, frankly, most challenging health issues seen in the justice system. So, grab a coffee, get ready, because we're going to break down this whole continuum of care step by step. Okay, let's dive right into this. When we look at these two realities side by side, we get right to the heart of the matter. On one hand, we've got treatment as a pure health service, treating withdrawal and addiction as serious medical conditions, right? But on the other hand, we see the broader reality. This is actually a massive public safety strategy. The stakes here are absolutely immense. Treating addiction behind bars isn't just about healthcare for the individual, although that's crucial. It is fundamentally about protecting our communities by reducing relapse, lowering the risk of overdose, and ultimately keeping people from repeatedly cycling back through the justice system. So, here is our roadmap for the journey today. We'll be looking at 1. The public safety strategy, 2. The critical first days, 3. Treatment behind bars, 4. The re-entry bridge, 5. Roadblocks to recovery, and finally, 6. The 2026 outlook. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the public safety strategy, and why these systemic shifts were so necessary. So, the risks of untreated addiction in custody are, frankly, severe. People who enter the system with untreated substance use disorders aren't just sitting in a cell waiting out their time. They're facing extreme, immediate medical risks. We're talking about a super high risk of severe withdrawal literally right out of the gate. And looking down the road, if that addiction remains untreated, the danger of an overdose absolutely skyrockets the second they're released, which directly fuels higher rates of repeated justice involvement. This is exactly why treatment can't just be an afterthought anymore. It literally has to be built directly into the correctional landscape, right alongside secure custody. Moving right along to Section 2, the critical first days. This is where the medical ticking clock really starts. And it raises a super vital question for all of us. When does treatment actually begin? Especially in short-stay jails where people are just cycling in and out rapidly, you might think, treatment starts weeks into a prison sentence. But the reality of medical necessity means that intervention has to start the literal moment those doors lock. Here's exactly how Montana's policy structures that initial crucial window. Step 1, early screening right at intake. Step 2, a thorough clinical evaluation. And Step 3, match services and coordinated care. What this actually means in practice is that medical, mental health, and substance use staff have to actively coordinate care together from day one. It's a team effort that aligns perfectly with modern correctional health standards. And it's important to note, this isn't just some local initiative. National guidance from the U.S. Department of Justice totally echoes Montana's urgency here, stating that jails need evidence-based tools to manage withdrawal safely and to connect people with treatment. Why? Well, because untreated withdrawal isn't just deeply uncomfortable, it can rapidly escalate into a full-blown, life-threatening medical emergency. Delaying care in those first few days, it's simply not an option. Let's move to Section 3, treatment behind bars. Once stabilization happens, what comes next? Now, what's really interesting about this setup is that we're moving way beyond that outdated, one-size-fits-all programming. In Montana, multiple layers of care are now available. Depending on the facility, these layers involve really comprehensive clinical assessments, individual and group counseling, and dedicated relapse prevention planning. Plus, for eligible individuals, there's another absolutely critical layer added to the mix: medication-assisted treatment, or MAT for short. Let's take a quick second to define medication-assisted treatment. Essentially, this is a specialized approach that uses specific FDA-approved medications in combination with traditional counseling. This is particularly vital for folks dealing with opioid use disorder inside Montana's facilities. It's a proven, evidence-based tool that literally stabilizes brain chemistry, which then allows the counseling and group programming to actually take hold and do its job. Which brings us to Section 4, the re-entry bridge. Let's talk about the transition back into the community. So the crucial point here is that we're looking at a massive systemic shift. Historically, the whole model was often treat and release. Do what you can inside and just let them figure it out on the outside. But now the model is treat, plan, and continue care. This entire paradigm shift is specifically designed to prevent that incredibly high risk of post-release relapse and overdose we talked about earlier. A major driver of this completely new model is the HEART Initiative. This is a massive state effort providing comprehensive behavioral health services, ongoing MAT, and case management to folks who are nearing release. But notice that last point, discharge medication. This initiative acts as a literal bridge back to society, making absolutely sure that eligible people actually have their prescribed medication in hand the very moment they walk out the facility doors. It's a real game changer. And we can actually see this step-down care concept taking physical shape. Through an effort called Repurposing for Recovery, the state took the former Watch East program over in Glendive and announced its transition into a community substance use disorder treatment facility. So instead of relying solely on incarceration, this is all about expanding residential treatment beds and creating structured, supportive recovery pathways. To make this whole system work, it really relies on 5 core, evidence-based principles: early screening at intake, access to evidence-based meds, tight, coordinated custody and medical staff, structured release planning, and firm connections to community providers and housing. Montana's policies show they clearly understand the theory here. But, as we all know, understanding the theory and executing it flawlessly day in and day out are 2 totally different things, which naturally leads us to our next point. Section 5, Roadblocks to Recovery. We need to look at the systemic challenges facing this rollout. The first massive hurdle is simply the map itself, the rural geography gap. I mean, Montana is vast, and when individuals are released back into deeply rural communities, connecting them with specialized local behavioral health providers or MAT clinics is a huge logistical challenge. Continuity of care is just so much harder when your nearest provider is literally hours away. Beyond the geography, there are severe systemic strains that actively limit program capacity. We're talking about major staffing shortages that directly throttle how many people can actually get help. On top of that, facility overcrowding means administrators are often forced to focus on just basic custody needs over advanced treatment. We actually saw a stark reminder of these exact capacity pressures recently when Montana had to temporarily move out-of-state inmates to Mississippi. Add in the rapid cycle of short-stay jail populations, and immediate intake screening and referral becomes incredibly difficult to manage consistently. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, the 2026 Outlook, and see exactly where Montana's ecosystem of care stands today. And this brilliantly illustrates the evolution of the state's investments. Before 2025, we had those historical disconnected treat and release models. Then, by 2025, we saw the aggressive rollout of the HEART Initiative and MAT expansion. And looking at the absolute most recent developments, on May 29, 2026, the state announced new federal funding specifically to expand mental health and substance use disorder treatment across Montana. Now, while this isn't strictly limited to corrections, this funding directly supports that exact ecosystem of care that is so desperately needed by people leaving jail or prison. Which brings us to the ultimate core takeaway for families, advocates, and policymakers alike. It boils down to this: healthcare behind bars equals public safety on the streets, by officially recognizing that substance abuse treatment is a core part of corrections, not just some optional side program, and actively treating addiction as a health condition before a person is released, the long-term outcomes for both the individual and the community improve drastically. So I want to leave you with this final provocative question to ponder. Can treating addiction before release truly build safer communities? The framework and the sheer investments in Montana suggest that the answer is yes, provided the very real, practical limits of staffing and geography can be overcome. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking those tough questions, and I'll see you next time.